Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Daybreak, as a second American missionary stricken with Ebola arrives at a US hospital, the World Health Organization calls an urgent meeting to ascertain if the outbreak constitutes a public health emergency. Korea's police and army chiefs resign on the same day, taking responsibility for their oversight on two high-profile cases. Plus, Pope Francis will meet with the survivors and the families of the victims of April's Sewol-ho ferry disaster during his upcoming visit to Korea. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Wednesday, August 6th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you're tuned in to Daybreak. And we start this morning with the latest on the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. As fears rise, the World Health Organization has announced that it will convene a two-day meeting of its emergency committee starting on Thursday. They hope to determine whether the current outbreak, which has killed almost 900 people, is a public health emergency of grave international concern. A spokesperson for the WHO said the main focus of the meeting will be the Ebola epidemic prevalent in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia. In the meantime, the second American Ebola patient has arrived on US soil. Nancy Writebol, one of the two missionaries who contracted the deadly virus in Liberia, was wheeled into a hospital in Atlanta on Tuesday. You can see the ambulance there. The patient, flown from Africa overnight, will be treated in the same isolation unit as Doctor Kent Brantly, the other US Ebola patient. Some people are naturally concerned about this latest outbreak, considering Ebola is one of the deadliest diseases on Earth. So what do we know about this highly contagious virus? Our Shin Se-min answers the key questions.
It will be extremely difficult at first to detect whether someone has been infected because Ebola symptoms are similar to the common cold in the beginning. But within just days, the patient will begin to experience chronic abdominal pain, bleeding eyes, vomiting, and diarrhea, along with deadly organ failure, eventually resulting in death within a couple of weeks. So how is the virus transmitted? Through direct contact with the bodily fluids of an infected person. This includes blood, sweat, saliva, or other body fluids, making transmission through casual contact in a public setting unlikely. But as I said earlier, because it's difficult to detect the virus in the early stages, there is an increased risk of transmission. Ebola can kill up to 90% of those infected, although in the current outbreak, the death rate stands at around 55%. And this latest outbreak that was first detected in Guinea in February is spreading fast and has since expanded to Sierra Leone, Liberia, and even in Nigeria. West African states especially lack the resources to fight Ebola, and cultural factors are also making it difficult to put the brakes on its spread. So what can we do to avoid coming in contact with this deadly virus? And just like any other stories like this, be sure to wash your hands regularly and be aware of people with flu-like symptoms. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, in some other news, and responding to public uproar about the case, the Korean government has vowed to expand its probe into the killing of a young army conscript who died after being struck in the chest by senior soldiers who had already put him through months of mental and also physical torment. Yulian reports.
Speaking about the 23-year-old young soldier who was bullied to death back in April, President Park Geun-hye vowed a thorough investigation and punishment for those found responsible. The comments came during a cabinet meeting Tuesday morning, a day after Defense Minister Han Min-gu apologized to the nation over the failure to prevent such an incident from occurring.
It's a military commander's basic responsibility to send enlisted men back to their parents safe and sound. We feel a great burden over this incident.
The 23-year-old Yoon was bullied severely by his comrades back in April when he was forced to hold a horse riding stance until the early hours of the morning and told to lick spit off the ground. He choked to death after being hit in the chest by 5 of his comrades. The army announced it will consider pressing murder charges against the 5 soldiers if found responsible for the young soldier's death. It's the latest in a series of similar incidents in recent months, and public distrust in the military is growing. An army sergeant who had been bullied by his comrades went on a shooting rampage back in June, killing 5.
When my son goes to the army, I'm going to check his body whenever I visit to see if he has been physically abused. I'm worried he may have to go through the same thing and be forced to hide it.
Harsh military practices and a distorted rank-based culture which seniors can use to abuse junior enlisted soldiers has long been prevalent in the military. To maintain a strong defense against North Korea, all South Korean men are mandated to serve in the military. But the recurrence of abuse-led deaths has the nation deeply worried about the safety of their sons. Yurian, Arirang News.
And staying with that story, Korea's army chief, the most powerful man in the country's army, stepped down on Tuesday to take responsibility for his failure to adequately deal with the death and the aftermath of the death of that young conscript. The Defense Ministry says General Kwon Oh-sung wanted to apologize to the Korean people for causing concern over the recent incidents in the army. He wasn't the only one to go, though. The nation's police chief, Lee Sung-han, also resigned for failing to promptly identify the body of the fugitive owner of the sunken Seoul ferry, Yu Byung-un. Now, a monument dedicated to the thousands upon thousands of women forced into sexual slavery in the early 20th century by Japan has been unveiled in the US state of New Jersey. 2 surviving Korean victims, now very elderly women, took part in the emotional opening ceremony. Our Kwon So-ah reports.
This iron butterfly has been established to remember the hundreds of thousands of women who were forced into sexual slavery before and during the Second World War by the Japanese military. Honoring the so-called comfort women from Korea, China, Taiwan, the Philippines, the Netherlands, and Indonesia, the monument was unveiled at Liberty Plaza in Union City, New Jersey on Monday. It is the 7th such monument in the United States honoring the sexual slavery victims, but this one is a bit different in that it's the first time a local government took the initiative in creating it. Korean communities had taken the lead in other projects throughout the U.S.
This is about human rights and it's about education. Educating our youth about what took place in the past so we don't make the same mistakes again.
2 surviving Korean comfort women took part in the emotional ceremony that welcomed some 400 people.
We thank the American and Korean people who have come here, and although we don't have much time left, we will live the rest of our lives with strength.
Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the California District Court rejected a request from a group of Japanese Americans who want a memorial statue that was put up last year outside of Glendale City Hall removed. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And it has also emerged that during their visit to the US, the 2 elderly victims of Japan's system of sex slavery, who you just saw there, also held closed-door interviews with officials from the White House and the State Department. According to sources this week, Eok Sun and Kang Il-chul met with the officials last Wednesday and Thursday and asked the US to take greater interest in trying to resolve this highly emotive issue. The White House reportedly said it would closely monitor the situation, keeping in mind that the women don't have much time left. The talks were the first face-to-face meetings between the former sex slaves and White House and State Department officials. Korea will be hoping the discussions will bring about some changes to the US government's policy on Japan's wartime atrocities. Now, every year for the past 10 years, Japan's government releases a report falsely claiming sovereignty over the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island in the East Sea. And this year is absolutely no different. The latest white paper was submitted to the cabinet by Japan's Defense Ministry on Tuesday, indicating the island as Japanese territory. The Korean government was extremely quick to respond. Seoul's foreign ministry urged Tokyo to withdraw the claims immediately and refrain from such activities in the future, saying such moves are not conducive to improving bilateral ties. It added, Korea's sovereignty over the island can be proven historically, geographically and internationally.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, Korea is very excited to welcome Pope Francis to the country next week. The Pope will be in Korea for a 5-day visit on what will be his first trip to Asia as pontiff. It might be a short trip, but the leader of the Catholic Church will be keeping an extremely tight schedule. Our Park Ji-won has the details.
This will be Pope Francis' first visit to Asia since his inauguration as pontiff in February 2013. Upon his arrival on Thursday, the Pope is set to meet with President Park Geun-hye. As for the rest of his schedule, he will take part in a celebratory mass in Daejeon, where he will meet with around 20 youth representatives from 17 Asian countries. He will also attend the beatification mass of 124 Korean martyrs who lost their lives mostly during the 19th century under severe religious persecution. The mass will be the largest event during the Pope's visit to Korea, held at Gwanghwamun Square in central Seoul, with nearly 1,900 priests and some 200,000 Catholic faithfuls attending. The pontiff will meet with the Asian bishops in Hemi, located in the country's southwest region, followed by a concluding mass for the 6th Asian Youth Day. And Pope Francis is wrapping up his visit with a mass for peace and reconciliation in Seoul, inviting nearly 1,000 people, including former victims of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement during the early 20th century. The preparatory committee for his visit says he will also meet bereaved families and victims of the April ferry disaster upon the request of the families.
We delivered the message immediately to Rome and received a positive response. We will be inviting families of the victims to a mass held on August 15th.
The Pope is expected to give words of peace and healing not only to the bereaved families, but the entire nation. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now back to some domestic political news. And following last month's by-election crushing defeat, Korea's main opposition party has been left without a leader, rudderless, and is not likely to have one until at least next year's party convention. That will be early next year. For the time being, interim leader Park Young-sun is at the helm, and she's promising a clean break from the past. Now, Ji Myung-gil reports.
Park Young-sun, who is serving as both the full leader of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy and the interim chief of its emergency committee, has been tasked with rebuilding and reforming the party. The committee will carry out a set of reforms until a new leadership is selected early next year.
Our party will select members for the emergency committee from both inside and out of the party. The public can also make recommendations through Twitter, Facebook, or our party's website.
The committee will function as the main opposition's executive branch until a party convention next year, sometime before March. There, officials will pick the party's new chairman, secretary general, and other senior executives. In her new role, Park, a 3-term lawmaker, is faced with the arduous task of finding a way to unify different factions within the party and forging a new path.
The future of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy depends on how well we extricate ourselves from old customs and old politics.
The pro-Nomuyon arm once held the lion's share of power, but was weakened following the defeat of former presidential hopeful Moon Jae-in, a key pro-No figure, in the 2012 presidential election. Pundits say that the pro-No faction is now likely to make a comeback. The main opposition party has been in a state of turmoil since its defeat in last week's parliamentary by-elections. The party won just 4 of the 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs, prompting party co-leaders Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo to step down to take responsibility. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Korea's largest ever personal data leak earlier this year is prompting financial regulators to make some sweeping changes. Starting on this Thursday, companies and websites will no longer be allowed to collect resident registration numbers, which are routinely required to log into websites for financial transactions. The 13-digit number, roughly equivalent to the Social Security number in the US, and assigned to every Korean at their birth, have been the biggest target of data theft in recent years here in Korea. Now, the Home Affairs Ministry says the change is part of efforts to prevent identity theft and also the loss of personal information. Violators who still take the number will be subject to fines of up to nearly $30,000 And these new measures come after nearly 20 million customers of the nation's 3 major financial institutions had their personal data leaked earlier this year. Time now for a look through some of the other international headlines we're following on this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the News Centre. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. A rare lull in the sounds of sirens and explosions on the Gaza Strip and Israel as a 3-day truce agreed by Israeli and Palestinian forces yesterday appears to be holding. The Israeli Defense Forces called back its ground troops, pulling out of Gaza a full 4 weeks after the launch of Operation Protective Edge on July 8th. Rocket fire into Israel also ceased as the truce went into effect at 8 a.m. local time. IDF's Chief Major General says its mission was accomplished, citing the destruction of the 32 so-called terror tunnels. Palestinians returned home to survey the damage as a delegation in Cairo will campaign for an internationally funded reconstruction effort overseen by the Mahmoud Abbas government. The cost is estimated to be at least $6 billion, according to Palestine's deputy prime minister. Now, attention will shift to negotiations in Cairo, where an Israeli delegation has reportedly arrived to hammer out a longer-term peace deal with their Palestinian counterparts. Some 15 people are wounded and an American 2-star general dead in Afghanistan when a man wearing Afghan army garb opened fire on the NATO squad at a training center in Kabul on Tuesday. Among the wounded were local army officers, a number of American troops, and a German brigadier general. A spokesman for Afghanistan's defense ministry said the, quote, terrorist had been shot and killed, but offered no motives for the attack. The suspected insider attack left soldiers tense and underlined the challenges still remaining in preparing Afghanistan for Western troop withdrawals. Ukrainian forces are closing in on the rebel-held stronghold of Donetsk, but the heavy fighting is triggering a warning by the UN that a massive exodus and destruction could be ahead. At least 2 civilians were killed in heavy clashes Tuesday as explosions sent residents scurrying underground to bomb shelters. Dozens of cars were seen leaving the industrial hub. It was not immediately clear who was responsible for the bombing, as rebels accused Kiev's forces for the campaign on Donetsk, while Kiev has denied using any firepower against residential neighborhoods. And finally, a 41-year-old convicted sex offender was arrested and charged with possession of pornography in the U.S. after Google sent them a tip collected from a Gmail scan. Houston police said the major search engine had notified the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children after detecting explicit images of a young girl in an email sent by the man. U.S. federal law requires entities to report child exploitation when it is spotted, but that development is raising privacy concerns.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the ongoing search for the next head coach of the South Korean national football team. And if you thought there was progress by now, well, not exactly. In fact, the search for the right head coach got a little tougher as the consensus #1 choice for the job, Bert van Marwijk, is in the process of signing with Belgium's KRC Genk. The 62-year-old Dutch coach led the Dutch national team from 2008 to 2012 and has been regarded as the best man available for the Korean national team job. Meanwhile, Lee Young-soo, the head of the technical committee, left to the Netherlands to speak with Van Marwijk. Well, one thing's for sure, finding a Korean golfer on the Rolex World Ranking in women's golf isn't hard, and looks like another Korean golfer broke the top 20 ranking this week. 19-year-old Kim Hyo-ju, who broke the single-season earnings record this past weekend in the KLPGA after winning the 2014 Hanwha Financial Classic, jumped up a few spots and is now ranked 19th in the world. That's the highest that she's been ranked in her career and also becomes the highest-ranked KLPGA golfer this season. And now shifting over to basketball, this time with the 2014 FIBA World Cup and the 2014 Incheon Asian Games coming up, the South Korean national basketball team finalized their roster on Tuesday. Now, after talking with head coach Yoo Jae-hak, the big man Ha Seung-jin was cut from the team as they decided to make up the height by going with 4 centers, including the young guns in Kim Jong-gyu and Oh Se-gun. Meanwhile, Moon Tae-jong was selected as the lone half-Korean player on the squad as his experience outweighed his age. Meanwhile, the team will begin training today before they leave to Spain for the upcoming World Cup. And now moving over to some Tuesday night KBO action, we finally got all 4 games in this time as the Lotte Giants and the NC Dinos had their game suspended in the 5th inning due to a power outage as they're tied 1-1 at the 5th inning and will resume at 4 p.m. today. Also, the Nexen Heroes cruised past the SK Wyverns 8-3 and the Samsung Lions crushed the Hanwha Eagles 14-1. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Tucson Bears take on the Kia Tigers. And of course, going into the game here, we go to the 2nd inning. Na Ji-wan deep to left field, got a leadoff home run, gives the Kia Tigers the 1-0 lead. But here come the Tucson Bears in the bottom of the inning. Hong Sang-won with an RBI single to left ties the game before Yang E-ji at bat triples to right center, giving the Tucson Bears a 2-1 lead. Next play, Kim Jae-ho, a clutch RBI single scores Yang E-ji from 3rd, and it's now 3-1. Now Tucson continues to swing away, including a 5-run 5th inning as they end their 4-game losing streak with an 8-2 victory. And now finishing things off in the PGA, where the 2014 PGA Championship is set to begin on Thursday, U.S. time. But before all that, all the focus is on whether or not Tiger Woods will participate in the event. Now, Woods, who pulled out of the Bridgestone Invitational over the weekend after hurting his back, is uncertain whether or not he will compete in the upcoming major. But his caddy, Joe LaCava, who is already in Louisville, Kentucky without Tiger, is optimistic, hoping that his back will be good enough for him to compete. Of course, Tiger needs to compete to have any chance at qualifying for the FedEx Cup playoff and a chance at making the U.S. Riders' Cup team. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, I hope you got to sleep well last night. It was so hot and humid overnight. Well, for today, a central region should see 5 to 10 millimeters of shower between the afternoon and the late evening, while the southern regions will have to bear with scorching heat with a chance of passing showers during the day. And highs will be hovering in the low to mid 30s across the nation with the heat wave advisory in plate. So definitely another muggy conditions will be featured. But daily high in Seoul will be a tad lower than yesterday, as the high in Seoul and Daegu will rise to 29 or so, that is, and Daegu will soar to 33, and Gwangju will reach 32, and Busan will have a daily high of 30 this afternoon. Now for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 30. Dokdo should see highs of 28, while Mount Keungang reaches at 18 this afternoon. Now, Super Typhoon Halong is forecast to shift direction toward Japan, but it's forecast to still give an effect on Jeju and southern coast areas starting this Friday. Well, that's all from me at this hour. Have a wonderful start to the day.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in about half an hour's time. And we'll be back throughout the day with more news updates. And I'll be back myself at 10 a.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.